Who could this mysterious man be? Hello everyone, yes there will be context for that. Yes, so this is my review of the latest Disney Plus Marvel streaming show, which is Miss Marvel, which I was really looking forward to. I think the character in the comics is fantastic, very sweet, very charming. And the question was going to be, would this translate to TV? Now, I think the thing is, normally with reviews, I try and keep them as spoiler-free as possible. The reality, I think, with this show is that I think a lot of the talking points I want to talk about are spoilers. So, if you didn't see the start of the video, just to be 100% clear, this is totally and utterly spoiler, totally spoiler. And I don't know how much more I could warn you about this, but final time, spoiler. Right, so, as with a lot of the other Disney Plus shows, this is 6 episodes, and this was, so you have to excuse me a second, so this was created by Bisha K. Ali and stars Iman Vellani as Miss Marvel, or Kamala Khan, to give her name, which of course is something that's important that will come out later on. And the thing with this show, obviously I've seen sort of differing views on the show itself, and I think there's a few things about it that I personally think are fantastic, some that are a bit weaker, but I think the big thing for me is that they pulled it back at the end, which I think is kind of the opposite of some of the other shows where the finale didn't quite stick the landing with what they built up. This one, I would argue, I don't think it was ever bad. I think this is the thing. I think you might have wondered where things are going, but I think there's some really good concepts. I think there's some really good themes. I think there's some really good characters. I'll try and broadly break this down. I might not do this completely episode by episode. In case you're wondering where the episode summaries were, I do this on Patreon because I want to do extras for people who have been very kind to sort of stump up the money for us, and there are other extra previews and artwork and things that you get depending on the tiers that you go for. You can put art requests, merchandise, depending on the amount you put in. So it goes from $1 a month to $20 a month, and I'm so super grateful to it's why we sort of do the Follow Friday. It's why we do like the little reel at the end. You guys are so important, and you basically give us a budget so that we're able to sort of do the comic. And there will be public previews very soon, but I kind of want everything to be ready for that. But like I say, if you sort of go through Patreon, DeviantArt, Ko-fi, you can have some early sneak previews if you want. But anyway, focus. So the first episode I thought was really good in sort of establishing the high school setting, the kind of imaginative side of the Miss Marvel character, and it worked. I thought it worked really well. I thought it worked really well in establishing characters, in sort of establishing the world, and I really liked that. And then the second episode, when you're looking at kind of the setup around the mosque and sort of the culture around that, and I think later on when we sort of get to sort of Pakistan and learning about the history of the character, and what I really liked about that, now I think it's kind of predictable. So there's this whole setup about how her grandmother got separated from her parents and they were reunited by some stars, and thanks to wibbly wobbly timey wimey shenanigans, it turns out that Miss Marvel is the one that created the path using her special crystally energy powers. Now this is of course a bone of contention with some people saying, oh, it's not like the comics, she doesn't have the weird awkward body thing. And I've got to say, I personally disagree on this. I think this works. I think, to be honest, the whole stretchy power thing, by and large, I'm not sure it ever really looks convincing in live action. I think it can work in a cartoon, I mean, feel free to correct me if you can think of an example where this has been done well, but by and large, like whenever I think of like Fantastic Four or anything else where sort of someone stretches out, it always kind of looks a bit weird and awkward. And as people say, oh, she's an adolescent character, it's supposed to be weird and awkward. I think you're kind of expecting too much of the audience to do legwork with that. What I liked about this in the show was that Ms. Marvel took time to kind of look, sort of become awkward. So there were the typical training sequences, but she doesn't always get it right. And the fact you've got like social media reactions to what she's doing, it feels more contemporary. It feels more like something that can exist in our world. And of course, New Jersey being a different setting helps that, and kind of like a quirky feeling, like, again, in a weird way, almost like an American Norwich, almost like, kind of has this bad reputation, but seems to be like this lovely sort of oddball community, and I really like that. I think the way they depict it is really cool, and I love that. I think it's fantastic. And again, I think the supporting characters are great. So I think Bruno is kind of your Wade guy in the chair. I think is very good. You've got Kamran, who becomes increasingly important later on, but sort of starts off as kind of like the crush character, and then we learn a bit more. I think one criticism has been the villains. So you've got like the Djinn clandestine people who are okay, but I think like the threat and kind of what they do just doesn't quite gel. And I think the thing is with damage control, I don't think it was particularly subtle, and you just think really like it was. I think it was a little bit too on the nose at times, that they were very sort of belligerent and insensitive. But what I did like, as I say, especially in that last episode, I think the thing is, beyond the powers, like in the last episode, what I really liked was how Ms. Marvel like used her smarts. Like, so she had like her board and like the little montage, and there was a plan, and the plan didn't just involve her, and they did like a little Thomas Crown Affair trick with the hoodies, which I thought was very cool. And yeah, I thought it came together really well. And I think, the humour's there. And I think as well, like, the parents, like, her dad in particular, like, when he's, like, dressed as the Hulk and she's sort of and, oh my god, I felt so bad for him, he's so sweet. But again, they pull it back, and with, like, an absolutely lovely... I love how, in the last episode, her mum gives her the costume and her dad sort of gives her the name. And I really like that. And it's... And okay, you could say it's sentimental, that it's, it's a bit of family. But it is. And, a lot of the time with these superhero things, they either like don't have family, or it's a very sort of much bone of contention thing. And I like that her parents weren't just purely strict. They weren't just like this kind of, I mean, don't get me wrong, like the kind of on purely East is East thing, when it's done well, is terrific, and people like that exist. But they kind of felt like, like as I say, it made sense that it was. They weren't purely strict. They had concerns. They were trying to compromise, but didn't quite come off. And you kind of learn more about them, and that there was kind of more to it and more layers than you think. Yeah, I think they were great characters, and yeah, just everything about it. I think, yeah, like you say, some cliches aside, like you say, like her mate kind of pining for her and what have you. It's like, very typical stuff. And then you had like the fun little Easter egg again. I've got a confession to make, so I know if I don't mention this thing, people will be like, oh, why didn't you mention the thing? So I'm going to mention the thing. So, at the end of the episode, so Bruno says, we have detected a mutation. Now, I kind of thought, oh, they're kind of alluding to X-Men, but like kind of leaving it ambiguous so they can sort of change it if they want to. But I didn't pick up, I don't know why I didn't, the music stinger was the X-Men theme, and it's like, now that that's been pointed out to me, it's like, okay, I originally thought that there was kind of room for ambiguity, but there actually isn't. And cool, if this is the way that we're sort of building up to bringing in the mutants, awesome. I mean, again, talking about Marvel, Miss Marvel, in the X-Men there was that brilliant episode where Rogue took Miss Marvel's powers, and that, you know, that's what kind of gave her like sort of her more typical set. And, you know, introducing her as a villain would be cool. Is it necessarily going to happen? You know, maybe not. I think depending on the type of story, she may or may not be suitable for that particular story or whatever they're intending to do. I don't know, given that it's more of a cosmic story, and they're sort of, you know, like I said, you've got Captain Marvel switching places with Ms. Marvel, like, I think there's room for sort of wacky shenanigans there, and I don't know, I'm intrigued to see what they do with it, and like Monica Rambeau's going to be involved in it somehow as well. And again, she was a cool character. I liked her in WandaVision as well. So, you know, I think there's room for, you know, sort of an interesting story. And I think, again, there's this whole sort of thing of, you know, well, you know, we're this far in, you know, what is Phase 4? And it's like, well, I think, again, this is the challenge when you've got a big sort of volume of stories. And it's tricky because I think, like, for example, like, people talk about, like, the Edgar Wright version of Ant-Man, and like, what would that have been had he been given more freedom? Where arguably you could say that Sam Raimi was given more freedom, and now for better or worse, he made what he made. I personally enjoyed it. You know, it's to others' taste, and I think sometimes people could get a bit too hung up on their expectations, and that affects their enjoyment in what they're watching. So if everything doesn't tie up perfectly neatly, therefore it's not good. And I think there's room for a bit more nuance. So, for example, I like the fact that Moon Knight was completely standalone. Well, pretty much. I mean, a few references aside. I like that. I like that this, whilst it has references, I think still works as a thing by itself. Ultimately, whether it's Marvel, DC, indie comics, whatever, stories are the important bit. The important bit is, did you enjoy this story? Did you enjoy watching it? And if you did, fantastic. If these things are a wider thing and they tie up together, brilliant. I mean, obviously, you had like the peak of that with Infinity War and Endgame. But that doesn't mean we can't get to a great point again. I think it's very difficult because I think when you call a film Endgame, I think it's then very difficult to kind of build up to that again. But I think if anyone can do it, Marvel can. But of course, as ever with these things, this is just my opinion. This is just me looking at something, and I think whether you want to look at it in a wider context or just as a thing in and of itself, I thought it was terrific. I thought, you know, we had an interesting angle on an area of history that I didn't know much about, and I think that kind of opened things up a bit, which was really good. I think some really good characters, a really good, solid series, which I personally really enjoyed. But there you go. Those are my thoughts. Comment below. Please keep it respectful. And like I say, more issue 5 previews and other stuff to come soon. Keep an eye out. Much love. Bye.